Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of the Shed Organics Show. My name is Jordan, and today we have an absolute legend in the game, Cam from organicferments.com. He is joining us today to talk all about ferments, fermentation, and the incredible benefits that you can get out of doing ferments at home yourself. And if you can't do that, please reach out to Cam. He'll be more than happy to help you out and get started in that journey. Now, in today's conversation, you will hear all sorts of different things about soil biology, making plant available nutrients through both liquid form and obviously breaking down through mulch layer, composting, organic amendments like the number one blend, and all of this in relation to organic living soil. Now, Cam and I both share the same passion for organic living soil, being able to grow in any size container, whether you're growing in a small pot or container on your balcony, all the way out to acreage where you can have huge permaculture style gardens as well to cultivate your own food and ultimately stop relying on our systems, our food chains, our supermarkets, and things like this. We're trying to empower and bring the knowledge back into ourselves and into the local communities so that we know exactly how to do the things that we need to do to grow healthy food for ourselves, our families, and our communities. Now, I'm a huge fan of Cam and everything that he has to offer, and I'm sure by the end of this conversation, you will be too. So please sit back, relax, and let's dive into the world of organic living soil with Cam from Organic Ferments. Tell me a little bit about like ferments in general and why ferments are something that either is important or it's something that people are now becoming more aware of is important.
Geordie, I think they're important because one, it's a probiotic. Now we know probiotics are good for us. They're good for our gut health. There's so much research to suggest our gut health is pretty much the same as soil health. You know what I mean? It works the same. Things are breaking down organic matter, taking the nutrients and expelling the waste. So I think the look, a lot of people are getting into it as a way of being more self-sufficient, and especially if you're closing the loop, so you're growing, say, your own comfrey, which I know you would. Like anyone who's into organics and sort of permaculture would be doing that. So if you're growing your own comfrey and you're using it like as a chop and drop, well, why not take some of it, chuck it in a fermenter with some EM1 or some labs and some rainwater and some molasses, and then have that availability immediately. You know what I mean? So when you're chopping and dropping, you've got to wait for the worms and everything to break it down. Whereas when you ferment it, you can then foliar spray. So your plants will uptake it within minutes, you know what I mean? And you'll see the benefits.
That's wicked. So tell me a little bit.
Plus, it feels good growing things, fermenting it, chopping and dropping, like you're closing the loop. So, and having your fingers in soil is brilliant.
Hmm, totally agree, bro. And the big thing there that you said, like about the relationship between our own microbiome in our gut and then the soil microbiome, it's we're essentially trying to bring in more of these microbes into the soil to be able
Mm.
to do the work for us. And I was speaking about it yesterday at the show, garden share, and we're talking about how microbes are the key to everything, really, to the key to soil health. Well, not only just the microbes, the whole soil system, but if you've got a soil that's microbe depleted and it's just it's dead, it's not a living soil, then you're not going to have a healthy plant and therefore not healthy food, or we're not going to be healthy in turn. So can you touch on a little bit about that, like the reason why ferments are developing all of these microbes? And you mentioned like the lab or the EM1 and things like this. Can you just go into a little bit about the process maybe of fermentation and why that is like generating such plant available nutrients?
Yeah, for sure. So when you chop your plants down, we take the sort of the first 4 inches of growth, so the apical growth, where all of the enzymes and growth hormones are in the plant. And we do this when the plants are respiring. So first thing in the morning, we're coming out and we're chopping all of the good stuff out of the plant before it's transpiring, before it's actively using its own reserves to grow. So we're cutting it down, we're trapping that, we're throwing it in a fermenter, we're adding EM1 and labs. So that's essentially effective microorganisms, which is different types of yeast. There's a couple of different sort of lactobacillus in there as well. Then we're adding in the homemade labs that we make, which has got lactobacillus plantarum and fermentum in it as well. Then you're adding a sugar source. So molasses is a great one because the less refined, the better, right?
Mhm.
Now, when you add your microbes and your molasses in, they consume the molasses first. It's easy to digest. Once they've proliferated enough and they go to work on the plant matter that you've added. So they chew down on the plant matter, they take all of the nutrients out and they store it in a pH stable acidic solution. So the pH, once it's digested, the plant material sits at around 3 to 3.5 pH.
Wow.
Now, that's shelf stable too. So you can keep it in a cool, dark place. Some will die off, right? But when you're rehydrating it, so you're diluting it when you're ready to use it, you're diluting it and then adding it into a living soil sort of system. So you're adding bacteria into the soil, which is the ideal space for it to go to work. It does what it does. Now, we touched on it before, phosphorus being the most available or the most prolific nutrient in all of our soils, but it's the most locked out. So when we're adding lactic acid bacteria or ferments, an acidic solution to our soils, we're liberating the phosphorus out of these bound up molecules because the lactic acid bacteria loves to eat rocks at the end of the day. So, yeah, look, there's so much to be said about the way that we can improve our soils. And, one of the simplest ways is to prevent your soil from being hydrophobic. Throw a layer of mulch down. Start there.
Mm.
Start with mulch. Start with a bit of top dress mulch and then dump some ferments on there and just watch your soil health improve.
I certainly saw that when I was using some of your products on the chili experiment that I was doing and still am doing on YouTube. It's now
Yep.
as the temperatures dropped, chilies are kind of, coming back, and I've had a few issues with the possums coming in and just wiping out all of the leaf material on there. But I saw some amazing growth from just throwing some of these ferments on, and as you say, it's pretty immediate. It comes in and just does the job exactly how we want it to do it. Um,
Yeah.
you touched on so many cool things in there that, like even just the lactic acid bacteria is it effective microbes, the EM1
Effective microorganisms. So,
microorganisms? Yeah.
yeah, it's brilliant stuff. Developed in Japan, I think, originally. Um,
Wow.
Actually, I've just released what we use. So we've released a product. It's a lactic acid bacteria inoculant for like a probiotic starter for your ferments, as well as a KNF inoculant as well. So a lot of what we do is you know based around sort of the holistic way of doing things, and I take a lot of inspiration from people like Chris Trump. And firstly, I'd like to give a massive shout out to Miles Filippelli from Fermented Plant Extracts, the probiotic pioneer that sort of started me on this journey anyway, and a lot of other people I know of as well as Jeremy from Builder Soil and AJ from Growing Organic. All great people, great teachers,
Hmm.
great educators in that space. Sorry, I forgot where I was going.
No, that's okay. That's all good. I was just talking like I wanted to kind of jump into the you mentioned you've got these two new products, the starters and things like that. So how would how would someone use those if I was to purchase them from you, and why do we use those?
Well, Geordie, the way you would use it, all the directions are on the label, but
Yeah.
you'd use the ratio is sort of 1 to 1 to 100. So 1 cup of our inoculant or microbe solution or starter, whatever you
Yep.
want to call it, a cup of molasses for
For
to
the
feed
food. Yep.
microbes. Yep. 100 parts rainwater.
Yes, and
Like
rainwater's
so,
important, isn't it? As opposed to
yeah,
town water.
yeah. Look, you can use whatever water you want. At the end of the day, as long as it's got no chlorine or chloramines in it,
Mhm.
if you're using town water, let it sit or put a bubbler in it,
What
aerator, or
about
just stick your head in it.
sorry, what about like demineralized water or your kind of reverse osmosis kind of water? Is that where it's completely free of everything? Is that still good?
Look, I believe it would be. Just
Yeah,
because it's got no microbes in it is irrelevant because we're adding our own anyway.
true.
The only thing you may get from using rainwater is a tiny little bit of atmospheric nitrogen that it captures on the way down.
Mm. Which is can be a good thing, I guess.
Yeah,
Yeah.
rainwater's good. You know what I mean? It's probably not as good these days as it once was with all of what's going on, but
Absolutely. No,
we
I
got to
know what
work
you
with
mean.
it.
Cool. So then you've got your rainwater, you've got your molasses, your food, you've got your starter, which contains all of the bacteria and the microbes, right? That you're going to be dumping in there. And then you're adding all this plus your plant material, I guess, which either for you is your comfrey, you've got the, is it, do you do peach as well?
No, Miles. Well, when our orchard starts fruiting, I will
Yeah.
for sure. After after we feed ourselves first, we'll
Yeah.
uh, we'll use what we've got left over or bits of waste, But yeah, we will be definitely.
That's
Yeah.
awesome. And
So
then you
that's a,
do,
that's a Miles for the moment, but we will be.
yeah, cool, cool. And you do, the other one is beetroot, carrot, pumpkin combo.
Yeah.
And you do an
Yeah.
alfalfa
Yeah.
and then an insect
Nettle
frass.
and stinging nettle.
And stinging nettle. Oh, I didn't know. Okay,
Yeah.
cool.
Stinging nettle's brilliant. It's a lot like comfrey,
Hmm.
in that it's a dynamic accumulator, sends down a massive root system that sort of grabs onto hard to reach nutrients that are deep in the soil profile, brings them up, stores it in the foliage. Then your boy comes along, chops it, drops it into the fermenter, and away we go.
That's brilliant. And then, yeah, so all of these different, like you say, the difference between something like a comfrey versus maybe even the insect frass, um, they're very, well, maybe not hugely different, but they do have their different uses and their different properties that will add into the soil, right? Even though,
Absolutely.
so like what I'm trying to wrap my head around is that you have these microbes, microorganisms, bacteria that are going in there and doing their job in the ferment to break down whatever it is that you're adding in. Are they then making those nutrients that were in that material available in the liquid that you're then in a plant available form that you're then putting onto your plants in a foliar spray or a soil drench or something like that, right?
That's the thought behind it. Yeah.
Cool. Do the microbes change, or are they all the same microbes that break it down? And or is it the plant material itself that has the different properties? So then, therefore, whether you're fermenting a comfrey versus an insect frass, your comfrey might have a higher, amount of, say, whatever a nutrient it is, versus your insect frass might have some other swing of nutrients or balance. Is that the idea?
Yeah, definitely, definitely. So like the thought behind it is fruiting and flowering plants have what fruiting and flowering plants need. So that's
Right.
phosphorus and potassium. Beetroot has boron, which is essential for pollen tube development, potassium for setting flowers, and you still need nitrogen in there for growth as well. Um, So yeah, absolutely. The thought behind the insect frass in particular, going back to what we were saying about the top dressing thing, is top dressing's great in like a no-till situation, but like anecdotally, if that's all you're doing, you're missing out on 30% of plant available nutrition by not foliar feeding a probiotic or some sort of compost tea or whatever it is you're making. The science behind it is, top dressing insect frass is great, but you've got to wait for the microbes to break that down and then for that to be available in the soil profile. Where in the fermenter, we've already done that.
Mm.
So it's immediately available. Now, when you foliar spray, the anatomy of the leaf is on the bottom side is you've got stomata, which are the mouth that breathe. They take in and release oxygen and whatnot. They transport nutrients as well. So when you're foliar feeding your probiotics, especially the frass, it goes down through the stomata, down the phloem layer into the roots and proliferates that way through your soil. Your plant's thinking, for want of a better term, it's like black soldier fly larvae shit and like superworm shit. Your plants hate those. You know what I mean? They're like,
Mm.
I'm being attacked. I need to do something, and that's by way of systemic acquired resistance. Your plant thinks it's under attack. So, what it knows how to do is either release essential oils or terpenes in an attempt to protect itself from attack. Now, the good thing is when we're foliar, cockatoos wanting to be fed.
That's right.
When we're foliar feeding the frass, instead of waiting, a week, 10 days, 2 weeks to see the benefit, it happens within minutes when you foliar feed. I've had reports of people using fermented frass in, various different herbal or, medicinal herb or flower applications, and the terpenes and smells and essential oils increase within 3 days.
Wow. Okay. So is there a time when this plant defense mechanism that it's going through is a bad thing?
I wouldn't imagine so.
So it's building the resilience, right? So it's kind of like putting the plant under a manageable or necessary stress that
Yeah,
gives it like in the same way that we might be pruning certain things to build the resilience and to promote stronger growth when it comes back. Same as when we go to the gym and we lift weights, we're trying to put ourselves under the optimum amount of stress to be able to then grow and get better. So that's essentially what's happening here. We're building the plant resilience, especially with the frass. Like it's going, I don't like this. Like I don't necessarily like lifting heavy weights sometimes, but it's like I don't like this, but it's going to build me stronger, and I'm going to be more resilient to pests. I'm going to be, as you say, it's going to be releasing some more of these medicinal compounds where necessary. Is that the idea? Is that like so you don't think that there's any necessary bad thing, or like can you overdo it with this?
look, you probably could if you were artificially growing things. So if you were doing hard drybacks and you know your lighting intensity was too high, and it was a perfect recipe or a perfect storm for disaster, then you probably wouldn't do it. You'd get your environment right, you'd get your plant healthy, and then you'd make your additions to sort of uh, crop steer, if you will.
Yeah.
Yeah, so you wouldn't sort of do it all at once, and you wouldn't put it under. You wouldn't put any sort of plant in any sort of undue stress, like in
Mm.
multiple different ways. Do you know what I mean? So
Yep.
yeah, you'd get your plants healthy, and then you'd apply the frass just to improve the overall plant health,
Yeah, cool.
vitality, and it will like the silica in the plants that it's grabbing from the soil will make the cell walls impenetrable to any sort of pest. They'll go, oh no, that plant's too strong. I'll go for the weaker one over here. That's wilting or already got pest damage on it.
That's really interesting. Well, I spoke yesterday about IPM and the pest management cycle, and I've been reading this book called Tuning into Nature by Dr. Philip Callahan, and it talks about it was written in the 70s, and it talks about how plants under stress, um, in this case, growing in the wrong conditions, growing out of season, not having the optimum soil buffet for us to have healthy plants, they send off this infrared signal, and it actually attracts the insects and the pests and bugs to come in and take it out. Because insects and bugs in most parts are the ones that are nature's decomposers in that instance. They're coming in because it doesn't align with what's going on in nature and it'll wipe it out. But if you've got a
Yeah.
really healthy plant that has high Brix levels, it's in a really nutrient rich living soil that has everything it needs, it's not giving off these same signals to the insects. It's not going, hey, I'm over here, I need taken out. So there's been instances where there's crops in one row that are untouched and crops in another row that are nowhere near as healthy. Same crop, same treatment, climate, all of that kind of thing. But they're going for the ones that are unhealthy, the ones that are signaling distress. So it was really interesting to talk about that. So you're right. If there's a plant that has everything it needs, it's not going to get attacked, and it's the attackers or decomposers are going to see it and go, "Nah, this one's too resilient. It's too strong," and
There you
uh,
go.
and won't go for it.
Nature always finds a way. Look, you could have the healthiest flowers. Like I had some cosmos growing right here, and where we are, it sort of touches 7 degrees at night time at the time of this recording. So the soil temperature is dropping. You know what I mean? And it's holding on to moisture at night time, and while the flowers are beautiful, you can see aphids and whatnot underneath the flowers. I'm like, look, if bugs aren't attracted to some of your plants, then you're out of balance somewhere.
You need manageable populations of each thing so
Exactly.
that you've got something like I use the example of aphids and ladybugs.
Mm.
Ladybugs need to come in and eat the aphids, and if you don't have any aphids, you're not going to have very many ladybugs. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
Even though they
exactly.
have other food sources. But
Yeah.
um, tell me a
Shout
little
out,
bit.
shout out to the green lacewing that smashes far more aphids than ladybugs do. They're just not as pretty.
True, true. That's such
Yeah,
a good point. Yeah,
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 massive amounts more.
yeah. Look out for those guys, and you can introduce those things in from like places like Bugs to Bugs. They can Bugs for
Yep,
Bugs.
for
I'm
sure.
sorry.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah, they're a great source of beneficial bugs.
yeah,
Definitely,
yeah. That's
definitely.
wicked. Tell me, because you touched on the temperature change. Now, obviously, like I'll give people a little bit of a backstory, but we were both once Redlands locals in southeast Queensland, and for those that aren't familiar with the Redlands, that's a coastal southeast Queensland area and can be subject to warmer temperatures. And in our subtropical climate, we get some decent humidity. Now you've moved out to Toowoomba up on top of the ranges, and you look nicely rugged up compared to me. Um, so tell me a little bit about your transition out there in terms of your growing approaches and how the change in temperature and humidity has affected your approach.
Great question, Geordie, and I'm still figuring it out. So we've only been here sort of since late December. So while we've been here sort of for nearly 6 months, there's been a massive process before I could even get into the garden. You know what I mean? With everything that had to happen. So I'm still working all of that out. So I do know we have got some stone fruits here. You know, the leaves are dropping. The weather's chilling them off. We're going to get some chill hours. So I do know we're going to get a whole lot of fruit. Um, in terms of all of my outdoor sort of like foliage plants that I love feeding probiotics, and I'm sort of really into growing ornamental plants at the moment. I'm loving it.
Cool.
Is a bit of a challenge up here, being a lot cooler. I do have a greenhouse out the back that's sort of got the overhead sprinklers, but it is getting a little bit too cold at the moment. So I've had to bring them indoors under cover with a little bit of supplemental lighting here. I've got some monsteras and elephant ears and all sorts of stuff growing here. But
Gorgeous.
I do need to throw a little humidifier out here, but
Yeah.
I don't want to be one of those people that have a humidifier growing outdoor plants. You know what I mean? But yeah, I don't know. It's just a challenge that I'll have to work it out as we go.
Yeah, that's it. I think that's really relatable too for everybody that has changed climates or areas because one way of doing things, even like in such a, Toowoomba is a what, 2 hour, hour and a half drive
Yeah, two
from
two 2 hours.
something about around 2 hours. And like, yeah, that's a decent distance in some cases, but it's almost a totally different climate because as you
It is
say,
a completely different climate. Yeah,
you're gonna hit negative degrees in the winter, and we won't over here, and we're 2 hours, out towards the coast. So that's a really big shift to have to consider. Um, you mentioned to me earlier nettles, stinging nettles. Is that something you were growing out in the Redlands in the subtropics? Because I've not heard of a huge amount of people that have had success with nettles themselves. Like you see them in, like originally my family's from the UK, so we have nettles just bloody everywhere, over there. And yeah, and it's something that's prevalent. They use stinging nettle teas and ferments. So how do you go with the nettles and do you have any kind of specific growing tips for nettles?
nettles have what nettles need, Geordie.
Yeah,
Yeah. So, like, no, I had zero issue growing them in the Redlands.
wicked.
Um, Zero. So, I'll send you some cuts.
Yeah,
It's going to
okay.
be easy. I'll send you some cuts down. Just get them planted. You'll smash it. Um, no issues. I mean, it's a prolific spreader.
Mm.
It just shoots pups up everywhere. So out here, it does really well. In the Redlands, it does really well. Just keep your soil moist, and you'll be right.
I think that's probably the key then, because we do tend to have these kind of drier spells, and people will have their soil dry out quite quickly in the hot summer heat. So maybe that's part of the issue. So if you've got nice balance in your soil, you've got mulch on there, moisture retention, you're gonna not have as many problems.
Yeah,
I find that a bit with the comfrey as well. If that tends to dry out, then you see a bit of problem starting to creep in.
yeah.
Um, Tell me about the alfalfa and your methods for growing that. That seems to be relatively easy to grow, right? And fairly prolific. And you spoke a little bit about, sorry for all the multiple part questions. You spoke a bit about like the optimum time to be chopping these plants, because
Yeah,
I know that when you've got the seed and the first part of germination, that's why sprouted seed teas and things like this do so well, is because they're full of all of that potential and the energy that's in there to required to be building the plant. Everything it needs is in that first seed. So, at what point are you chopping, maybe say alfalfa, because we're talking about it? At what point are you thinking like, okay, this is the optimum amount to take because versus amount of plant material versus amount of nutrients?
look, it depends. It's all going to work, right? It's just the top 4 inches of the apical growth of any plant is where all of the growth hormones and enzymes are stored. Overnight, when your plants are respiring, all of that energy is stored in that top 4 inches. When the sun rises, the dew hits, the VPD is good, man. It's going bang, I'm
Yeah.
off. So the thought is, before that happens, before that plant wants to explode with growth for the day, you come in and you get it all down. So yeah, either with KNF or fermented plant extracts, the thought is the same. The top 4 inches is where all of the goodness is. But with alfalfa, lucerne, we call it here in Australia for those playing at home. It it's a legume plant, right? And like all legumes, it will capture atmospheric nitrogen, N1, store it in nodules on its root system, which is N3. When you chop
Yes.
and drop, as above, so below, it dies off. It releases plant available nitrogen back into the soil. So what we're doing here is we're taking the top 4 inches of the growth, we're fermenting that. I'm working on a new release of an FPJ blend that I'm not going to go too much into detail, but we're going to incorporate the N3 root nodules out of the soil into that as well.
Whoa.
Um, so yeah, keep your eyes peeled.
That's cool.
It's going to be a multi plant FPJ, sort of your nettle, your comfrey, uh,
Wow.
your lucerne, and some N3
What do you
root
just
nodules.
just for curiosity, FPJ stands for?
Fermented plant juice.
Mm.
It's a Korean natural farming prep. It's essentially using osmotic pressure to draw out the nutrients of your plant material or fruit, whatever you're fermenting, pulls it out so rapidly that the cells explode and you're left with a liquid solution, which is
Right.
Mickey
Yes.
Mouse.
Mickey Mouse. Love it. That's cool. I know that you've taken a lot of inspiration from the KNF and the Jadam styles as well. Like they've been pretty big pioneers of this type of technology, right? And it's so simple. Like it's really simple. You're just letting nature do the work for you to create these processes. You're just making the best environment for them so that they can go and do their thing.
Just being a good custodian.
Yeah, that's it. That's exactly right.
Yeah.
Um, so is that something that you like yes, take a lot of inspiration from and then use their techniques and you sort of adapt them based on where you are and what you can grow? Because for like we have a few listeners that are in the US, we've got a few listeners over in Europe, which is cool. But they might not have the same growing conditions or they might grow different plants. So when you're thinking about choices of plant material and things like this, are you going off um, specifically proven recipes worldwide, like KNF, Jadam, things like this, or would you more come from it from a perspective, like you said before, about if you want to be developing flowers and fruits on your plant, have flowering and fruiting material that goes into your ferments?
Yeah, exactly. Like grow, like start with what you can grow. Do you know what
Mm,
I mean? Like as long as it's not toxic, and it's not poisonous in any sort of aspect or scenario, start with what you've got. Like you can ferment grass clippings. You know what
mm,
I mean? If you've got nothing around, start with that. Start building compost. You know what? It's a holistic way of doing it, but I think you'll feel better about it and a more of a sense of accomplishment if you're growing what you're fermenting as well.
true.
And
And
yeah,
then
exactly. Like flowers have what flowers need. Fruit has all of the potassium and the phosphorus that you need to grow flowers and more stone fruits as well.
And that comes from, in my mind, the fact that in nature, for example, if you had a fruit tree, it would drop all its fruit onto the ground, and then that would therefore be worked into the ground and then feeding the tree. And it creates this perfect cycle of needing exactly what it needs from itself, which
It's not
is,
rocket science. And I tell you what, if you go to anywhere that's sort of got like an undisturbed sort of like a mango tree somewhere, you know, the possums get in and they chew down the fruit, then it rots. If you dig in that soil, it will be some of the most carbon rich, black, humus filled soil that you would ever hope to try and find or make. And all you've got to do is think, well, that why is that like that? Oh, well, it's carbon based. You know, it's all carbon that's rotting into the
mm,
soil. Well, let's replicate that here by composting. You know, and it just gets people thinking.
that's such a good point. I'm gonna go and I know where a few mango trees are. I'm gonna go suss them out and
Just
maybe
have a
steal
look,
a
man.
bit.
Yeah, definitely have a look, and you'll be bringing in like indigenous microorganisms from that area into your garden, which is only going to be a good thing.
Yeah, that's really true. Um, Sorry for jumping around a little bit, but I want to go
Awesome,
back
okay.
the you mentioned if we're not using FPE or any kind of ferment, how are we missing out on 30% of soil nutrition? Because,
It's anecdotal.
oh, right,
It's
okay.
anecdotal. Yeah, it hasn't been scientifically proven that you are, but plants can absorb 30% of their nutrients through foliar feeding.
Right. Okay.
Yeah,
So it's through the foliar feed that they are getting a 30% boost, for example, roughly,
yeah,
with that. Okay.
yeah,
Because as you say, with the locked out phosphorus in the ground, like if you don't have all of the right microorganisms and bacteria and microbes in the soil, you're not going to have access to the full nutrition profile that the plant needs, right?
no, no.
So how,
All you would have would be dirt, and it would just be an anchor system for the roots.
yeah. Because I've found that using, well, specifically your products, I guess initially, because that's something that I found worked really, really well. It's just like not only foliar feeding, but kind of just drenching the soil, like putting some in with some of my watering and putting it through the soil. It seemed to be a lot quicker at developing that living soil kind of approach where you can kind of pull the soil apart and you see all of these moving things and it's got
Yeah,
this beautiful consistency to it. And I noticed the mulch layer, whether it's my chop and drop, it's my the number one blend with all the organic amendments, they're being worked into the soil a lot quicker
mm,
than if you were just leaving it without using these ferments and things. So
yeah,
that's essentially what we're doing, isn't it? We're increasing the population in the soil to allow that mulch layer to start going, the soil biology to keep up with the plants, and
yeah,
just to fire up that system
yeah,
completely.
yeah,
Yeah.
definitely. When you're adding, like when you're soil drenching, in particular alfalfa, just by default, it's 30,000 ppm saponins. So
Wow.
people spend all this money on yucca and saponin this and saponin that. Just grow it, loosen and ferment it. Like when you spray that on, you can see it foaming. And all
Mm.
of that is keeping those microbes in that soil profile for longer so they can breed, you know, and generate more microbes that are going to improve the tilth of your soil. Add in a mulch layer, you know, sorry, take that away, and you've got UV from the sun that's just belting on that, top 6 inches of soil, and your microbes are going, fuck that.
Yeah.
I'm going down here. That's how you end up with the dry layer of soil plus the evaporation.
Hmm.
Get some mulch on there, hit it with ferments, and just watch your soil profile improve. The tilth of your soil, the humic content of your soil, it'll get darker, like your number one blend. You know what I mean? Add that in, top dress that, hit it with some ferments, and let's liberate the phosphates out of there and get it into the soil and into our plants and into our fruit.
That's wicked, man. I really like that. And talking about the natural saponins, as you say, like just to have this um, kind of soapiness, right, that comes into it. I used to use things like soap nuts. I'd just
Yep.
kind of, chuck them in. And shake it up a little bit, get a little bit of a soap nut in there, get some soapiness to it. And that, like as you say, it kind of helps it stick right into the soil and maintain a little bit of the moisture without it being completely drained straight through and ripped out. Is that the idea?
Yeah, it just breaks the water tension, and like you can achieve the same results with, pardon me, like a drop of dishwasher soap. If you've
Yeah,
got nothing else, or like
Castile
a
soap, right? Yeah.
Castile soap. Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. Look, shout out Dr. Bronner. The peppermint Castile soap is
Bro, that's
brilliant.
that's
Good.
exactly the one that I use, the peppermint Castile.
Not the
Yeah,
blue
from
one.
Bronner's. Yep, that's the one.
Yeah, look, the peppermint one especially, it's brilliant. And look, in replacement of the alfalfa ferment, if you're not growing it or fermenting it, everyone uses soap. So make a good choice and get a good quality Castile, and it's all derived from plants. So It's brilliant. Plus, the peppermint essential oil helps deter bugs as well.
Yeah, bro, you're taking this right out of my mouth. The peppermint one also like sorry, the soap in general, it helps it kind of stick to the leaves a little bit too, right? Is that the idea? So what's the benefit of I mean you touched on this a little bit before, but the benefit of it sticking to the leaf is it gives it longer time for that plant to absorb it through the leaf and send it down. Is that the
Yeah,
idea?
yeah. I mean, yes. When we're talking about a foliar feed,
Yes.
yep, definitely. When we're talking about trying to suffocate soft-bodied insects, that comes in handy as well. You know what I mean? So the more time that they're covered, the more likelihood you are of suffocating them and getting rid of them. For example, I had some mealy bugs on a fiddle leaf that I've got. Quick hit of Dr. Bronner, at the correct dilution,
Yes.
not straight soap, but and overnight gone.
Hmm.
Not gone, but dead,
Yeah.
dead, and just stuck to the leaf. Yeah, yeah,
Uh,
powerful stuff.
it's great, isn't it? And I think with the foliar sprays, for example, um, is there a optimum time to be spraying these? I think I might know the answer to this, but why are we doing that at an optimum time? And what's the benefit?
Look, there, yes and no. With organics, especially FPEs, they are acidic, but we're diluting them to neutral anyway. So no, there really isn't a perfect time to be doing it. Obviously, in the morning when your plants are respiring, they will respond better to a foliar feed. Would definitely avoid spraying any sort of eco neem oil, white oil, horticultural oil, anything like that in the middle of the day. I'd sort of be doing that in the afternoon, so it's got overnight to absorb. But yeah, no, with ferments, man, you're pretty well good to go.
That's cool because, as you say, like I do think about it from that maybe pest prevention mindset where we don't want to be spraying any kind of oil that's going to burn the leaf material in that hot sun. But my first thought was that, okay, if the plants in the morning are ready to fire and they're engaging all of those processes to respire and you know, shoot up with growth, that might be the best time to be putting those on the foliar feeds so that then they can really utilize that quickly. But
Definitely.
if it's sitting, say if you do it at any time, it's still going to use it the next day or something. The microbes aren't going to die off or anything, are they? Like,
No, 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 no. Especially if you're, I just want to touch on if you're spraying during the day or in the morning, say it's all well and good to be spraying your oil, your neem oil or your horticultural oil, but if one of your parameters is out, say you've got a really hot and dry day forecast, then you're adding another element that can go wrong. So, you know, I'd be sort of inclined to do it at night time just to sort of safeguard, any sort of potential compound effects from a shit storm that could happen.
mm,
So, hot climate, no humidity, spraying oil on your plants in the morning to last all day, it could have a more negative effect and invite pests in rather than preventing them. So it's just sort of being mindful of what you're spraying when and sort of eliminating unnecessary risks.
mm.
Um, yeah,
That's a really good point because yeah, you don't want to add an extra layer of stress to something that's already stressed out from environmental conditions.
or
So
pests.
yeah,
Yeah,
or pests. So maybe yeah, nighttime sprays anyway is probably if you just aim for that, then you're going to be all good for your pest stuff.
especially with your neem, like any sort of oil. I'd be doing it,
Mm.
as close to nighttime as possible, late afternoon. Like FRAS is sort of your maintenance sort of solution. It's going to activate your systemic acquired resistance. So there's no sort of real issue with that unless you're spraying it at a higher dilution and your plants are sensitive to sort of a more acidic solution.
Yeah, cool. Let's talk about the frass a little bit. Now, you have this incredibly stinky frass solution, which is, um, obviously when they say that good stink goes in, then you're going to get good flavor, for example, coming out. Um, Tell me about the frass and why that can be really useful aside from that sort of plant defense things, because we have the frass that gets broken down naturally from insects dying in the soil. That's essentially what we're trying to mimic here, right? And what insects are you using, and how would we acquire insects ourselves to be able to make one if we wanted to make one at home?
You could make a black soldier fly larvae bin, like an
Mhm.
ecopod type thing. It's brilliant if you've got chooks. So you set it up, fill it with coffee, and they sort of eat all the coffee. And once they're grown, they'll climb up and they'll harvest themselves. So you can set it up so they harvest themselves straight into your chook pen. Once they've finished eating all of that food and turned all of that substrate into frass, you can take that and ferment it or top dress it, do what you like, or you can approach a company like Southern No-Till. I know they make a frass or Bardi frass or Larvalicious on the
Mhm.
north side of Brizzy. They're a great small business that are incorporating diverting waste streams into getting broken down organically. So they're another great company. And if you're after worm castings, In the Loop is a
Yeah.
great dude. Mitch, shout out Mitch. He's an awesome bloke and a massive advocate for organic and syntropic production or
Mhm.
cultivation. So yeah, there's a lot of great people out there that you can look to and support or do it yourself.
Yeah. And what are you using primarily for your ferment? What insects are you using? Black soldier?
Black soldier fly frass or
Yeah,
larvae frass. Yeah.
and they're so prevalent and easy to do here.
Oh,
And I've seen mealworm frass advertised a fair bit as well,
yeah,
like people trying to, get rid of that and repurpose it out. So there's a whole bunch of benefits to using anything like that that you can repurpose waste streams, as you say. Um,
definitely.
and the worm castings, like, black gold essentially, really, isn't it?
Yeah,
These
yeah,
and we see often, I know, like this is relatively common knowledge, I guess, but I like to touch on it again. When we see worms in our soil, most of the time they're earthworms, right? They're coming up in, they're not necessarily our composting worms, which tend to give us a higher quality frass, right? And if you're feeding them the right ingredients, like, for instance, I feed them the number one blend, my worms, so that they are breaking down this already, and it's in that nutrient-rich casting that I can then use, make a tea out of, blah blah blah. Um, are you using worms, and like which sorry, how do I phrase this? Which worms are we looking out for in terms of ones to use? Red wigglers, things like this, for an example.
yeah, definitely. So while I've got a continuous flow through worm bin,
Awesome.
and I use red wigglers, African night crawlers, and I think blue, there's a blue type as well. I'm not too sure, but as much food as I could load into it, we're out here on the Darling Downs, there's a lot of agriculture around, a lot of seed, which means there's a lot of mice. So they've they've gotten into where I harvest. They've chewed through about that much cardboard, and they're nesting in my worm bin. So,
Wow.
like the type that you're after for composting is definitely the red wigglers. They stay in the top 6 inches of your topsoil. Look, if you could incorporate a handful of that into into your top dressers, into your garden beds, you'd be doing yourself a great service.
This is what
Uh,
I was getting at too. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So, but they do get out competed with by those Asian jumping worms. Have you seen those? They get to this big and they go mental when you
Mm.
touch them. They're like
Yep. Yeah.
bounce around like a two bob watch. It's crazy.
Yeah, I've seen those for sure. They're really interesting characters, eh? But they can also be beneficial, right? Then but I mean, as far as like worms go, we'd love to have some of those red wigglers. I find obviously if you're growing in the ground, a lot of this is going to naturally occur. If you're using your own harvested worm castings and putting them on, there might be a few eggs and things in there that you're going to
Oh,
then
for
hatch
sure.
and do that sort of thing. So that's really wicked. But primarily focusing on container gardening and growing in pots. Like I try and advocate a lot for small scale gardening because a lot of us are on smaller properties, and as the cost of living goes up, more of us are having to downsize and growing on a balcony or something like this. And I'm trying to I know you're all over this, but like trying to encourage the living soil system on a small scale in a container or something like that. Now, I've seen the benefits of using worms and using, I guess, cover crops and living mulches, and then the ferments as well on these small scales in pots and things like that. And as the container size gets smaller, the more tending you have to do to that soil. Can you talk to me a little bit about small scale and how the difference you've seen between, say, growing in a small container versus growing in the ground, and how much work you have to put in to each one, and how much benefit you can get out of using a ferment on a smaller scale because of what we were talking about earlier about the outpacing of the biology and that kind of thing.
Yeah, for sure. Look, I'd encourage anyone to get into gardening however you can. Now, whether you've got 500 acres out here in a paddock, or you've got a 3 by 3 space to grow as much stuff of or produce as you can. I'm a massive believer in organics and the holistic way of encouraging people to make their own soil, or at the very least go and buy some good quality living soil from either high powered organics, easy as organics, organic gardening solutions. They all make great soils. Now, you keep feeding your soil as your plants are growing, right? You're increasing the bricks levels of your whatever you're growing because you're adding organic material in, whether it's compost, fruit scraps, or ferments. FPJs are sugar based, so you're going to have richer fruit, or flowers, or whatever you're growing. Um, in terms of trying to keep it matched, I'd sort of outpacing is what you were saying. You want to be growing. If you're not growing in the ground, you want to be growing in as big a container as you can sort of afford. Now, instead of trying to grow something that's outpacing that soil battery, grow what you can. You know what I mean? Like grow an annual herb, or grow some perennials, or whatever you can. Grow something that's going to give you a bit of satisfaction, whether it's a sunflower or something. Um, Sorry, bro. I'm lost now.
No, that's exactly what I was hoping for. It's just a little bit of just trying to generate support for those that are worried about the fact that they're thinking, I've only got a balcony, or I've only got a couple of containers or pots that I can even manage during their busy weeks and things like
That's
this.
all you need. That's all you need. Like, you don't need massive amounts of acres. Use what you've got. Use a good quality organic living soil. Use something like the number one blend. Incorporate worm castings in it that you get, whenever you're adding dry stuff, try and add something that's wet.
Mm,
That's the way I like to look at it. So if I'm adding a number one blend, I'm adding 2 or 3 times the amount of worm castings. So, I'm coding all of the blend in biology. So I'm initiating that breakdown. I'm
mm.
top dressing that. I'm hitting that with ferments, which is going to accelerate it even more. You're going to watch your plant grow, and you're going to watch the gap between the top of your mulch and the top of your pot get bigger as
Yeah.
your leader roots are smashing all of your top dress and whatnot. your pot's shrinking, so you've got to keep adding more. Whereas if you start with a bigger sort of container size, where you won't need to do that quite as much, and you'll have a bigger soil battery.
Mm.
But grow what you can in whatever space you can, and you'll feel a sense of fulfillment. I guarantee it.
So give me a couple of places where people can start to go and reach out to some companies and things, especially if they're in the local area. Where can we go and start this whole living soil journey?
Oh, Google, YouTube. Google or YouTube the Jeremy or the Builder Soil 10 by 10 series. That'll really get your mind working into living soils. There's producers here locally, HPO, OGS, Easy As Organics, great living soil companies. Yourself, you make a really good dry mineral amendment blend.
Thank you, bro.
Um, I want to give a quick shout out to Brekkie Bowls Art Gallery down in Victoria. Another shout out goes to Timmy from the Blazing Trail, who is importing all these little seed sprout starters. Now, a lot of people have difficulty germinating seeds, especially if you're out somewhere like here in a cool climate. I think these things keep them moist, humid, and warm. So,
Cool.
yeah, for those struggling to germinate seeds, hit up the Blazing Trail.
That's cool, man. I really like that. And the as we spoke about before, the genetic potential in those seeds and having a sprouted seed tea. I've used I use the malted barley in the mix, but also things like I might even just use wheatgrass seeds or something and just sprout them so the little tail comes out, blitz them up, add them into some
Yeah.
water, and then straight in as a feed as well. They can give you some huge benefits.
Another big shout out goes to a mate over in Pennsylvania, Keith. He's on Instagram as Leg Days. He does a lot of seed sprouted teas. He's a massive fan of it. Lot of enzymes, a lot of growth hormones, a lot of saponins, depending on the seeds that you're growing. I know what's that stuff? Chia seeds is a massive. It nearly turns to jelly. You know what I mean? So
Wow.
you're blending that stuff up, alfalfa, aloe,
Mm.
all of that stuff. Get into it, do some research, yeah, start gardening, and you'll feel good.
And there we have it, everybody. An absolutely fascinating conversation. And I did mention to Cam after the conversation that I'd love to have him back on to dive even further into soil biology and nutrition science a little bit more because we only scratched the surface of Cam's knowledge on all of these wonderful topics. And I'm sure that you'll be interested to know exactly what's going on in the soil so that you then can work out how do I best replicate the organic systems that we see in nature and what might be missing in my system to create the most thriving, healthy living soil that we can. Now, Cam mentioned a fair few legends in the game, not only from our own homeland here in Australia, but worldwide too. So please go and check out a fair few of those people. I will do my best to link as many of those links as I can in the description in the show notes. So if you don't find those links down there, either I've missed it or you can just go and search them up yourself. I really highly recommend that. First and foremost, though, please check out Cam on Instagram at Organic Ferments. I'll have those links down in the description below. And also check out his wonderful products. If you don't have the space or the ability or the time to be doing some of these ferments, even though they can be easy and you can learn how to do it, Cam is the guy to go to. I've had some wonderful success with using his products on the garden. You'll be able to see those in the YouTube series, The Chili Side by Side. I've had some wonderful experience with them. I've seen some great results in my garden, and I just highly encourage you to go and check it out. Buy a bottle of the ferments and get started on that journey yourself to organic, thriving, living soil. So, to round it out, a couple of things from me. As you know, if you found some value in this podcast, It is super appreciated if you could go and leave this a review on Spotify, Apple, wherever you're listening to this podcast. Give it a review, give it an honest review, drop some comments in there because that really helps to stimulate the algorithm to share this to more people so that we can give this knowledge to more gardeners and help out more people be more self-sufficient. Lastly, the organic growers guides. We've got two. Okay. The first one is free. Go and check that out. Organic growers guide on my website. The link is down in the description. It's free. You can get started in organic growing practices. Now, I have also released a an intermediate growers guide for a small fee. And this one goes far more in depth. This is nearly 20 pages long and it's 3 times the length of the beginner one. So if you're feeling like you've got your head around the first parts of beginner organic growing, then this might be the level up that you need just to dive a little bit more into some techniques that can really help you level up. So that's it from me. Thank you again very much for watching and listening. Really appreciate your support, and I'm beyond excited to jump into the next episode with you next week. So take care, enjoy your gardens, and I will see you again on the next episode. Take care.